Mr. President.
The junior senator from Alaska.
Thank you, Mr. President. And today I rise, as I like to do at the end of the week, to talk about somebody in my state who's made a real big difference to Alaska, really in many ways to the country. And it's a good opportunity for me to come down on the floor and brag a little bit about Alaska, although my state does a really good job of selling itself anyways. It's what we refer to in my office as the Alaskan of the Week, and it's a great opportunity to talk about not just the wonderful things that we have in Alaska. Those of you watching or in the gallery or on TV, the wonderful mountains, oceans, how beautiful the state is. Right now, the sun is out again and shining high. Snow's melting, the buds are coming out, birds are coming back. But it's a really good opportunity for me to talk not just about the natural wonders, but the people that make Alaska such a great place. And Mr. President, why it doesn't get as much attention as it deserves is the incredibly fascinating and sometimes tragic history of my state. And it's a good opportunity for me to talk to my colleagues about that and the people who have worked hard and been part of that history and have helped to heal some of the scars that have been left from that history. So, Mr. President, along with talking about the beauty of Alaska every week, we talk about someone who's made a difference. And this week, I'd like to recognize Dimitri Philemonof and all the work he's done over the decades for his community and for his state and really for his country. Dimitri was born in 1944 to Irina and Isaac Philemonof on the breathtaking, beautiful island of St. George Island, one of the two principal islands of the Philemonof Islands in Alaska. Surrounded by the Bering Sea, the Philemonofs are about 750 miles from Anchorage and about 500 miles from the Siberian coast. The Philemonofs are really one of the wonders of the world, particularly with the nature that's there. Stellar sea lions, walruses, sea otters, tens of thousands of fur seals. And depending on the season, more than 2.5 million seabirds call the Philemonof Islands home. The Galapagos of the North, it is sometimes called, because of this teeming wildlife. And you'll also find in the Philemonofs, Mr. President, the warmest, most resilient people anywhere in the world. The Philemonofs, as well as the entire Aleutian Island chain, has a storied and, to be honest, sometimes painful history in our country, a history that has shaped Dimitri's life. First, when Alaska was a colonial possession of Russia, Russian fur seekers decimated the Aleut native populations on these islands through warfare, disease, and yes, even slavery. Then 75 years after the United States purchased Alaska, during World War II, Japan invaded and occupied Kiska and Attu Island, the westernmost islands of the Alaska-Aleutian island chain. Now, a lot of Americans don't know that American territory was invaded and occupied by the Japanese during World War II. It was the first time since the War of 1812 that American soil had been occupied by an enemy. The Japanese dug in and held these two islands in Alaska until the mid-1940s, until 1943, when American forces recaptured Kiska and Attu in a brutal campaign in the cold of Alaska. That campaign to retake Kiskonetsu resulted in the deaths of about 1,500 American servicemen. More than 600 were missing, and almost 3,500 were wounded in action. A major, major battle of World War II. Less well known is the impact this conflict had on the Aleut peoples of Alaska. As a result of the invasion, nearly 900 Aleut civilian residents of the Pribilof Islands and the Aleutian Islands in Alaska were relocated to temporary internment camps in southeast Alaska. Among those interned were Dimitri's parents, 2 of his brothers, and a sister who was born in the camp. Now, Dimitri himself jokes and laughs that, in his words, he was actually conceived in the camp. Mr. President, the treatment of our American citizens, and these are great American citizens, patriotic, serve in the military at higher rates than any other ethnic group in the country, that the treatment of these American citizens in these camps is a dark spot in American history that not many Americans are aware of. The camps were basically abandoned buildings. The conditions were awful, crowded, unheated, unsanitary. Some even died in the camps as a result of these horrendous conditions. Our citizens, in our country. Yet, like so many Alaska Natives, as I just mentioned, who were not treated well by our government during this time, Dimitri, nevertheless, signed up when he was of age to serve his country in the military. In the 1960s, he joined the Army and served in the Pathfinder Detachment at Fort Rucker, Alabama, and he was an airborne soldier. Eventually, Dimitri made his way back to Alaska and met his wife, Victoria, and started a family. He is the proud father of 5. And he began to work at the Aleutian Pribilof Islands Association. Hard work, dedicated work, where he is now the president and CEO of this association. And the association has had numerous accomplishments under his leadership. Since 1985, it has greatly expanded its programs for the people of the Pribilofs and the Aleutians, and its budget has grown from about $2.5 million to more than $18 million to fund these important service programs under his leadership. For years, he did something that was so important that this body was involved with here in the United States Senate. He worked closely with Alaska's congressional delegation at the time, Senator Ted Stevens, Senator Frank Murkowski, and Congressman Don Young, to work on, educate the Congress, educate the Senate about this difficult history during World War II, and to help pass legislation entitled the Aleutian and Pribilof Islands Restitution Act, which compensated surviving Aleut victims of the internment camp, where they, again, American citizens sent by their government during the war to internment camps in Alaska. Not many people know that history. He not only knew it, Dimitri lived it, his family lived it, but what he did that was so powerful was he helped heal it. He helped heal it right here on the floor of the United States Senate. He then helped pass the Aleutian Pribilof Restitution Trust to oversee money allocated to rebuild some of the buildings and houses in this part of Alaska that were destroyed during the war and the fierce battles that raged in my state during World War II that not many Americans are aware of. So that's a great life. That's service. Dimitri is also an artist, helping to preserve Alaska Native culture through his beautiful drawings, particularly of Russian Orthodox churches in the region, churches that he has worked tirelessly to maintain throughout Alaska. And these are beautiful, beautiful churches. A lot of talent, a lot of service. And he also does an incredible Elvis Presley impersonation. He's a man of faith, of perseverance and kindness. And as I've mentioned here and tried to highlight just a little bit of his life, he's devoted his whole life to his people, to my state, and really to this great nation. In May, he will be recognized by his colleagues for this service and 40 years of humanitarian service and for helping heal the wounds of this country that came about during World War II. So we want to thank him for all he's done in his beloved Philemonofs, in Alaska, in America, on the floor of the Senate, in Dimitri. I want to thank you once again and congratulate you on being our Alaskan of the week.